I've been riding my whole life since I could, not since I could walk, but I've always remembered having a bike. When you grew up in the 1970s in Sydney, you either had a bike or you didn't go anywhere because your parents didn't drive you. So ridden bikes, all sorts of bikes, road bike. I've still got my 1994 Apollo Concorde, great bike, love it. Done so many Ks I can't even count anymore. But in 2012 I rang a good mate and I said, mate, I want to get into mountain biking, and he said, go and buy this bike. Now this is what I bought. It's an Anthem 2012 29er, dual suspension, 100mm up front, 100mm down the back, famous Maestro suspension, 20 speeds, 180mm rotors, 2-pot brakes. I also fitted an aftermarket dropper post. That's why it's got all this ugly cabling down the side here, and that's my dropper post activator. I've done a separate video on the dropper, which I really liked, and it's been a game changer, to be honest, with cycling. But what happens when you take a schmuck like me that rides this kind of mountain bike and put them onto something that's a lot newer? Well, let's find out. Well, I'd say welcome to the future, but it's not the future, it's actually the past. This is a 2022 Scott Genius 920 full carbon. It's rocking Magic Mary 2.6 fronts. It's got 160mm plunge at the front, and it's got 150mm plunge at the back. It's got Fox front and rear, 36mm forks, all internally routed, so the cabling is really neat. Single chainring, which I thought would take a bit of getting used to, but it's just divine. And I'll have to look up, I think it's a 51:10 on the rear cassette, and rocking XT mid to high spec gear set. Pretty nice rims, I think they're DT Swiss. Anyway, so this thing has a 170mm dropper. It's got a slack angle of 64 degrees compared to 71 degrees for the Giant. This is 106 odd mil longer in wheelbase, and I'll do a side-by-side comparison in a bit. The downside is it's a little bit heavier. Righto, got the Giant on the hook. If you can't read that, it says 13.89 kilograms. Righto, next on the hook is the Genius 920 full carbon, mind you, 15.11 kilos. The other big difference is with brakes. So this has got 203mm rotors at the front and 4-pot brakes, and also 4-pot at the back and 180mm rotor at the back. And the braking on this thing with these SLX brakes is just superb. And the other thing that I love about it is it's got the Scott lockout. So you've got first position, which is limits travel to 100mm, and second position limits travel to about maybe 10-15mm, which is full lockout, which you would only really ever use on the tarmac. So that's in open mode, half position, fully open, and then same on the back, fully open position, half position, and fully locked out. So I really love this. The only problem with this, which other people have commented on, is that sometimes you can do your climb and you can forget to release your suspension, and so you go off your first drop or you go off your first little bunny jump or something like that, and all of a sudden, whack, you think, man, the plunge on this thing is not very plush, and you realize that you haven't released the travel lockout. The big question is, like, I'm an early 50s schmuck, does a bike like this make me a better rider? Is it worth upgrading from my Anthem, which is probably worth $500, to this, which you can spend between $3,500 and $4,000 on? The 950 non-carbon spec of these, you see them going for sort of $1,500 to $2,000 for a 2-year-old, 3-year-old model. These are selling for sort of $3,500 to $4,000. So is it worth basically a $3,000 upgrade, and does that make you a better rider? Well, let's find out. Okay, so here we go, side by side. So the big difference is, I just want to have a bit of a look at the difference between the back dropper. This has got a 170mm dropper, all internally routed. Let's pop that up. Whoop. And that's much easier to depress. This one I fitted myself. It's called a zoom dropper, and it's only 100mm. So the difference of 70mm is quite remarkable. I wouldn't have thought it would make so much of a difference to descending, but it really does. The other thing is, with only 100mm front and back, you really do run out of travel if you're doing anything that's a little bit gnarly. But the major difference, 71-degree slack angle versus 64-degree slack angle, and you can even see it side by side. the difference with that 7 degrees is quite amazing. The wheelbase is longer, it's 106mm longer on the Scott compared to the Giant, and that gives you a huge amount of confidence because the front wheel is so much further in front of you when you're tackling anything that's a little bit gnarly or technical descending. Now, according to the Norco website, I am an intermediate rider and I'm quite happy with that. I don't do anything that's too crazy, and I don't do big jumps, I don't do big gaps, I don't want to die, I don't want to end up in hospital with a broken face or a broken anything really. I've done enough minor injuries on mountain bikes over the last 13 or 10, 11 odd years, and 7,500 kilometers I've done on this bike, by the way, 7,500 Ks, so it's been well loved. And my weapon of choice is XC. It's not crazy descending or enduro, and I'll go out for a maximum of probably 3 to 4 hours. I have done some longer rides, 50, 60 Ks in the saddle, but that's pretty much it for me. Anyway, let's take them both through. Let's take the Scott for a spin and the Giant down the same tracks, and we'll do a bit of a comparison. Alright, 38 degrees. Yeah, you've got to be a bit of an idiot to go out riding in this sort of weather, but you've got to be a bit of an idiot to go out riding in this weather. Let's go. Okay, all good. 10 minutes later I'm at the trailhead, so nice ride up. So I've popped, that's full lock, I've popped that out, got the dropper down for a bit of a descent, and that's my entry point. Okay, one thing that I do like about this Scott is how well it climbs. So I'm in the 100mm lockout position now, just on this nice bit of single track, about to go down to a descent. So I've got the seat fully extended, and this is my drop in here. So give myself full travel, drop the seat down and get my ass off the back here, and down I go. Okay, and coming up is the descent that always terrified me when I was on my Giant. So I've been over it a few times on this, and it just eats it up. Again, make sure you're clipped in, keep your weight back, and down you go. Woo. Okay, so I'm going to do a climb here just to compare the climbing of this compared to the Anthem 29er. So I'm actually going to lock this all the way out, drop down onto granny gear, just start grinding my way up. For a bike that's heavier than my Giant, it actually climbs surprisingly well. Look, it feels pretty stable, and if I drop to the 100mm bob position, the 100mm compression on the shocks, it's even nicer because it seems to take the bob out of it, but you can still climb. Very nice. Up we go. Now, one thing I like about this bike, I've just stopped to get my breath back before my heart explodes. Up we go. 38 degrees, 2 more hills to go. But anyway, drop your seat down and so much easier to straddle. All right, come on fish. Just like that, very nice. Such a lovely climbing bike. And these bars at 800 took a little bit of getting used to. I think my Giant's got 740s or maybe 760, but this is a lot wider. So when it gets tight in the trees, you've got to thread your way between trees. Now, this is my favourite bit of single track on this particular path. You can really put it down.
I'd always believed that 2 chain rings would give you a greater spread of ratios, i.e. a higher top of speed
useful because I ride on the road to the trailhead, and lower gearing for climbing. Well, this online gear calculator I found is brilliant. You just throw in your chainring and cassette ratios and use your measured rolling wheel circumference, and you get the spread of speeds based on a set cadence, where 90 is the default. You can display teeth, ratios or speed, and you can override any of the presets if your chainring or cassette combos aren't listed. What I confirmed was I was wrong. The Scott has slightly lower gearing, of course better for climbing, and loses out by just 4 kilometers an hour in top speed at the same cadence. So if you increase the cadence from 90 to 99, you can match the Giant's top speed. So the twin chainring is better myth is totally busted. Righto, back at the trailhead, this time on the beautiful, the mighty Anthem, with its 100mm dropper. 100mm doesn't really stretch out to 170 or even 200mm, which is what I'll be riding next time. Anyway, back on this, I'll see how I go. I've never done the full descent on this bike before. It's just a bit too rowdy, it feels very uncomfortable, it's very jolty with only 100mm travel. 170mm on what I'm riding, and then 160mm on the Scott Genius is really quite lovely. So anyway, I'll see how I go on this. So this bike is definitely lighter, you can feel it, and it's easier to climb with, there's no doubt about it, but it doesn't descend as well, there's also no doubt about that. So 690mm bars compared to 790 or 800, which is the norm. So it feels very light, very twitchy, but just doesn't have the travel to make it a supple bike for descending, and the lack of a decent dropper is a real Achilles heel. All right, down we go. So get this dropper all the way down, lock down, down we go. Gosh, that feels so much harder. It's just so much slower to descend, just because you've got to pick your way down little rock gardens. You just can't nail it. Woo! Oh, and yeah, you can come unstuck. All right, see how we go. Whoa, crikey. I almost came off that. Not good at all. Wow, that is very unsettling. So that's a difference of 7 degrees in this head slack angle. 71 degrees on this bike, 64 on what I'm riding next, and 65 on the Scott Genius. 7 degrees makes all the difference. All right, so granny gear, seat post up, ready for a grind. That last little descent was quite unsettling on this bike. So yes, it's sort of 2 odd kilos lighter. And you can feel that going uphill. Not 38 degrees today, but probably 30. And very, very high humidity. Yuck. Okay, drop it down, down we go. So the saga for the perfect bike continues. So my mate with the punctured lung selfishly took back his Scott Genius 920 Carbon. I have stopped riding my Giant 29 because I've bought a bike. This is what I bought. It is a Norco Sight C2. It's got Fox factory. Now everything that I'm showing on the bike came like this. It's got a Magura 203 diameter rotor. It's got Industry 9 front hubs. It's got Fox factory 38 front forks with 170mm of travel. Birchtech stem and bar. It's got a 200mm dropper. It came factory with these cracking tyres, FR560 DT Swiss rims. These pedals, I'll probably put my own SPDs back on there. So 4-pot brakes front and back. This thing is an absolute beast. And it's heavy. It's about 15 kilos. So a little bit, 15.3, something like that. I have put it on the hook. So it's heavier than my Giant by about 2 kilos. Heavier than the Scott Genius by about 800 grams. But it is such an absolute beautiful plush ride going downhill that the extra pain from the extra weight climbing, and of course no lockout, but the extra weight from climbing, you quickly forget it when you can just muscle over stuff that you would otherwise have to pick your way down on a rowdy descent. But so far I've done round about 150 k's on it. I did 100 k's on my mate's Scott Genius, so I had a very good sense of what that bike was like. Look, it was fantastic. It was a beautiful descender, was really good with the lockout up on the bar. 170mm dropper on the Scott Genius, 100mm on my Giant 29er, and 200mm on this thing. So you can do it one-handed. Beautiful. Absolutely cracking thing to ride. Righto, back again, this time on the Sight, all carbon. I've had this now for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, just sort of getting it dialed in. Really loving those factory Fox 38 forks. So I'm going to do this sort of, I'll call it a standard loop with a little nice little fairly rowdy descent. And I guess I can compare that, not physically because I've given back my mate's Scott Genius 920 Carbon, but I can certainly compare it to my Anthem 29er, which is lighter, but it's only got 100mm of travel. It's 7 degrees steeper in the head angle. The other thing about this bike is the dropper. So I can get this dropper down 200mm, which is just an amazing amount of travel. So you can really get your ass all the way back off the seat. Anyway, let's go for a ride. Feels a little bit heavier than the Giant on the single track, and the wider bars probably make it a little bit more stable but less twitchy, but we'll see how it goes on the descent. Seat down we go. Woo! Wow, that is just an amazing difference compared to going down that last week on my Giant 29er, the Anthem. It just smashes over the top of it. It's great. You basically just got to point and roll, and every time you do it you get more and more confident. And the big thing with this bike I'm finding is that it really does inspire confidence, whereas even the Scott Genius made me, I'm not a great technical rider, but it made me a little bit nervous, like I was pushing a limit, whereas on this bike I feel like I'm the limit, absolutely, and the bike just has so much more to give. So absolutely loving this. Do another little descent and then I'll do a climb and see how we go on the climb. All right, starting the climb. Got the seat all the way up. No lockout on this bike, and that is something I really did like on the Genius, on the Scott Genius. Anyway, into granny gear, away we go. All right. Oh, there's a climb and a half. Righto, here we go. Righto, this next little descent I've only just discovered, and it looks from the top like everything. It looks very scary, and on anything else I've ever ridden, there's no way I would attempt it. So I'm thinking I'll give it a crack, and I'm not wearing body armor, but what's the worst that could happen? Probably lots. It's all rock. Oh yeah, oh yeah. All right, feeling very good about those. All right, never seen that here before. And what's this like riding to and from the trailhead on the tarmac? It's fine. Again, not quite as light as the Giant, but absolutely adequate. So another feature I like about the Norco Sight is that you can change up one as usual, or you can change up as many as 4 in one shift. 1, 2, 3, 4. You just have to keep holding the shifter down, 4 gears, and then when you want to change down, you can either pull back on the indexer, or you can push forward on the indexer. Which is really handy. Up 1, 2, 3, 4, or 4 at once. A really handy feature. Awesome. Righto, so what's the verdict? The verdict is that the geometry makes all the difference. That 7 degrees difference in slack angle up front between the Giant and either the Norco or my mate's Scott Genius that I was riding makes a huge amount of difference. It's, you know, you're talking 100 mil longer when you're sitting in the saddle, and that makes the wheel far further out. It gives you a lot more confidence when you're descending. The plushness of the suspension going from 100 to 170 millimeters travel on super plush 38 Fox factory forks is just a remarkable difference. And having that dropper post from a measly little 100 mil on my Giant to 200 mil on the Norco Sight, or 170 mil on my mate's Scott Genius is also, 170 mil is fine, by the way, and the Scott Genius is a very competent bike with 160 mil travel up front. This thing with 170 mil is just bonkers. It's allowed me to tackle things that I wouldn't have even contemplated, and things I almost can't walk down, and I'm now riding down them, and I am not a strong downhill technical rider, so I'm absolutely thrilled. I paid $3,800 for this. It's worth about probably 9 grand in the trim that it's in, with the Fox factory 38 forks, the rims, the i9 hubs. It's a full carbon, including the rear triangle. So it's a cracker of a bike, and it's really encouraging me to ride even more and harder than I already was. So I sort of squeezed the last skerrick out of the Giant. No complaints at all. I've loved the bike. 7,500 Ks. I've really wrung its neck, and it's been, you know, well ridden, well serviced. And I'm hoping that this Norco Sight is going to give me another legacy for another 10 years. See how we go. So I realized after doing this lengthy video that I didn't actually answer my own initial question. Is it worth upgrading from a 12, 13-year-old Giant Anthem 29er to something that is a lot newer with a lot more aggressive, a lot slacker head angle geometry, a lot more plush suspension, a really good dropper, etc, etc? The resounding answer is yes, absolutely. Look, $3,800, it felt like a lot of money, but in 12 months time I won't even remember it. And as they say, there's no pockets in coffins. If you're going to do it, just do it. You'll never regret it. It was a great decision, and I'm loving this bike. Absolutely thrilled. Really good. Thanks for watching.